The knocking on the door became louder. Bang, bang, bang. Kelvin's heart was beating like a drum inside his chest. Sonia looked at him with raised eyebrows. "Kelvin, are you not going to open the door?" Kelvin forced a smile that looked more like someone trying not to cry. "Ah, it's probably just the security man." Sonia stood up. "I'll open it." Kelvin almost jumped across the room. "No." Sonia paused and looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" Kelvin's brain started racing like a motorcycle without brakes. "I mean, allow me. It's my house." Inside his mind he was shouting, "God, please let it not be the landlord." But the knocking continued. The voice outside shouted again, "Open this door now." Kelvin closed his eyes slowly. That voice. I know it. He walked toward the door like a man walking toward his own judgment day. Behind him, Sonia folded her arms and watched carefully. Something about Kelvin's behavior suddenly felt strange. Kelvin opened the door slowly. And there he was, Mr. Adimi, the landlord, standing with his hands on his waist like a police officer ready to make an arrest. Kelvin forced a weak smile. "Good evening, sir." Mr. Adimi pushed the door wider and stepped inside the apartment. He looked around the living room slowly. Then he turned to Kelvin. "Where is Emeka?" Kelvin swallowed. "Ah. He traveled." "Yes, I know he traveled," the landlord said. "So why are you living in his house?" Sonia's eyes moved from the landlord to Kelvin. Kelvin laughed nervously. "I'm not living here, sir. I just came to check the place." Mr. Adimi raised one eyebrow. "You came to check the place, with a woman?" Kelvin's mouth went dry. Sonia suddenly spoke. "Kelvin, what is he talking about?" Kelvin opened his mouth, closed it again. Nothing came out. Mr. Adimi shook his head slowly. "Young man, Emeka told me nobody should stay here while he is abroad." Sonia looked at Kelvin again. "Kelvin." Kelvin quickly tried to recover. "Sir, relax. I have permission." The landlord crossed his arms. "Show me." Kelvin froze. "Permission? What permission?" The only permission he had was hope and confidence. And confidence was starting to disappear quickly. Just then Kelvin's phone started ringing again. He looked at the screen. Bayo calling. Kelvin almost fainted. He rejected the call immediately. But Bayo called again, and again, and again. The landlord noticed. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Kelvin forced a smile. "Just business." Sonia was now staring at Kelvin like a detective watching a suspect. Something didn't feel right anymore. However, in Lekki Phase 1, another man was also preparing for disaster. Tunda Balogun stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie. Tonight he had a dinner date with Lola, a woman who believed he was a big tech entrepreneur. Tunda checked his wallet again. Inside was 5,000 nairas. He sighed deeply. "How will I survive this Lekki lifestyle?" Dinner in most Lekki restaurants could easily cost 30,000 nairas or more. But Tunda had a plan, a very dangerous plan. He whispered to himself, "I will take her somewhere small." Tunda opened his phone and searched. Affordable restaurants in Lekki. One result appeared. A small local restaurant with decent food. Tunda smiled. Perfect. But there was only one problem. When Lola arrived at the location and saw the place, her face immediately changed. "Tunda, this is where we are eating." Tunda cleared his throat confidently. "Yes, it's a hidden gem." Lola looked around. Plastic chairs, old fans, a television showing football highlights. She blinked twice. "I thought you said you do international business." Tunda smiled proudly. "Yes, so why are we eating here?" Tunda leaned forward and lowered his voice like a philosopher. "Because real billionaires value simplicity." Lola stared at him for a few seconds. Then she laughed. Interesting. But deep inside her mind she was thinking something very different. Something about this man is suspicious. Back to Kelvin's disaster. Inside the apartment, the tension was growing. The landlord was still standing in the middle of the living room. Sonia looked at Kelvin again. "Kelvin, are you sure this is your house?" Kelvin opened his mouth to speak. But before he could answer, there was another knock on the door. This one was even louder. Bang, bang. Kelvin whispered to himself. "What again?" The landlord looked irritated. "Open it." Kelvin slowly walked to the door. His heart was beating so fast he could almost hear it. He opened the door, and the moment he saw who was standing outside, his soul almost left his body. It was Bayo, standing beside the black Lexus. He spoke loudly. "Mr. Kelvin, I came to take the car." Unfortunately, Sonia was standing right behind him. And she heard everything. Her eyes widened slowly. She looked at Kelvin, then at the man outside, then back at Kelvin again. The room suddenly became very quiet. Kelvin felt sweat running down his back. Because at that moment, his entire fake lifestyle was hanging by a thread. But what Sonia said next? Nobody expected it. Sonia slowly stepped forward. She looked at the man outside. Then she looked at Kelvin again. And suddenly, she started laughing. Not small laughter, loud laughter. The landlord looked confused. Kelvin looked terrified. Sonia wiped tears from her eyes and said something shocking. "Kelvin, relax." Then she leaned closer and whispered, "You are not the only one pretending." Kelvin's brain stopped working. "What do you mean?" Sonia smiled mysteriously. Kelvin was still standing at the door like a statue. Bayo was outside waiting impatiently. The landlord stood behind him with folded arms. And Sonia was still laughing. Kelvin looked at her like someone who had just seen a ghost. "Why are you laughing?" Sonia wiped tears from her eyes. "Kelvin, calm down." Kelvin was confused. "Calm down. My life is collapsing." Bayo cleared his throat loudly. "Sir, the car." Kelvin sighed and stepped outside to hand over the key. Then Bayo took the key and shook his head. "You people and fake life in Lekki." Kelvin didn't even have the strength to argue. Kelvin slowly returned inside the apartment. The landlord was still there. Sonia was sitting comfortably on the couch like she was watching a comedy show. Kelvin looked at her carefully. "You said I'm not the only one pretending. What did you mean?" Sonia leaned back and smiled. "You really think I'm rich?" Kelvin blinked. "Well, your Instagram page." Sonia interrupted him. "Instagram is entertainment." Kelvin frowned. "Wait, you mean those luxury hotels? Content. The designer clothes. Returned the next day. The expensive restaurants. One drink. 2 hours of pictures." Kelvin stared at her. His brain was trying to process everything. "So, you're not rich?" Sonia laughed again. "Kelvin, if I was rich, do you think I would be borrowing handbags from my friends?" The landlord suddenly started laughing loudly. "Ah, so both of you are acting movie inside this house." Kelvin looked embarrassed. Sonia raised her hands. "Sir, please don't expose us." The landlord shook his head. "You young people in Lekki will finish yourselves one day." Then he pointed at Kelvin. "You, leave this apartment before tomorrow." Kelvin nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." The landlord walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back and said something funny. "Next time you want to impress a woman, use your own house." Then he left. The door closed. Silence filled the room. Kelvin and Sonia looked at each other. Then suddenly, both of them started laughing. Long, loud laughter. Kelvin held his stomach. "This is the most embarrassing date in my life." Sonia laughed too. "Same here." Kelvin wiped his face. "So, what now?" Sonia shrugged. "Well, since both of us are broke, maybe we should go eat something cheap." Kelvin smiled. "I know a place." Meanwhile, Tunda's dinner date with Lola was becoming very awkward. Lola was staring at the plate of food in front of her. "Tunda, be honest." Tunda forced a smile. Yes, you really run an international tech company. Tunda nodded confidently. Of course. At that moment the restaurant owner walked past their table. Tunda, why didn't you come for work yesterday? Tunda froze. Lola slowly turned her head. Work. The restaurant owner continued talking. You still owe me 2 shifts in the kitchen. Tunda quickly stood up. Uncle, please. Not now. But it was too late. Lola folded her arms. So, the international businessman works in the kitchen. Tunda tried to explain. It's temporary. Lola laughed softly. Interesting. Tunda suddenly realized something shocking. Lola was not even angry. She looked amused. Then Lola leaned closer and said quietly, Tunda, relax. Tunda frowned. Relax. Lola smiled. You are not the only one lying. Tunda blinked. What? Lola leaned back proudly. I'm not a corporate manager. Tunda's mouth dropped open. You're not. Lola shook her head. I'm just an intern. For a moment both of them stared at each other. Then they both burst into laughter. While all this drama was happening across Lekki, one person was living a completely different life. Ada. Ada worked as a nurse at a private hospital. She didn't post luxury pictures. She didn't pretend to be rich. Her life was simple. One evening she was leaving the hospital when she saw a familiar face sitting outside the gate. It was Kelvin. He looked tired. Ada walked closer. Are you okay? Kelvin looked up slowly. Yes. Just tired of pretending. Ada sat beside him. What happened? Kelvin laughed weakly. I tried to act rich in Lekki. Ada smiled. That is a very expensive hobby. Kelvin looked at her. You don't pretend. Ada shook her head. No. Kelvin sighed. Maybe I should learn from you. Ada looked at him seriously. You should. Then she said something simple. In Lekki many people chase the appearance of success, instead of real success. Kelvin stayed silent. Later that night, Kelvin received a message from Sonia. Big party tomorrow night in Lekki. All the influencers and big boys will be there. Kelvin typed back. Why are you telling me? Sonia replied immediately. Because we are going together. Kelvin frowned. Why? Sonia sent one last message. Because tomorrow, we are going to prove something. Kelvin stared at the phone. Prove what? Sonia's next message made his heart beat faster. The next evening in Lekki was unusually lively. Music was already shaking the walls of a large mansion in Lekki Phase 1. Luxury cars filled the compound. Range Rovers, Mercedes-Benz, a few Bentleys. At least, that was what it looked like. But if someone checked carefully, many of those cars were rented for the night. Inside the mansion, the party was already in full swing. Influencers were taking pictures near the swimming pool. Some young men were walking around with expensive drinks they could barely afford. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was laughing. Everyone looked successful, but many of them were secretly calculating their bank balances in their heads. Kelvin arrives. Kelvin stood outside the mansion gate adjusting his shirt. Beside him was Sonia. She looked stunning in a black dress. Kelvin whispered nervously. You didn't tell me this place would be this big. Sonia smiled. Relax. Kelvin looked around. Luxury cars everywhere. He sighed. I should have borrowed another car. Sonia laughed. You still haven't learned. Kelvin shrugged. Old habits die hard. They walked inside together. Immediately music blasted through their ears. The DJ shouted into the microphone. Welcome to the hottest party in Lekki tonight. Lights flashed everywhere. People were dancing. Phones were recording. Kelvin whispered to Sonia. I feel poor already. Sonia laughed. Half of the people here feel the same way. Meanwhile, at the same party, Tunda and Lola were also arriving. Tunda was wearing a shiny suit he borrowed from his cousin. Lola was wearing a dress she planned to return to the boutique the next morning. They walked in confidently. Tunda looked around. This place is packed. Lola nodded. Yes, and many of these people are pretending. Tunda laughed. How do you know? Lola pointed at a man posing beside a Lamborghini. That man took pictures with that same car at 3 different parties last month. Tunda burst out laughing. Ah, Lekki people. They moved toward the bar. A man nearby was speaking loudly to a group of girls. Yes, my company just opened offices in Dubai. Tunda whispered to Lola. I know that guy. You do? Yes. He sells phone chargers at Computer Village. Lola almost choked on her drink. Kelvin and Sonia were standing near the pool. Suddenly someone tapped Kelvin's shoulder. Kelvin turned around. His eyes widened. It was Bayo, the owner of the Lexus Kelvin had borrowed the day before. Bayo looked at him suspiciously. So this is where you are? Kelvin laughed nervously. My brother. Forget that story. Bayo noticed Sonia and smiled. Ah, Kelvin, you didn't introduce me. Kelvin cleared his throat. Sonia, this is my friend Bayo. Bayo shook her hand. Then he said something that almost gave Kelvin a heart attack. So you are the girl that made Kelvin borrow my car yesterday. Kelvin nearly shouted. Bayo. Sonia burst out laughing. Don't worry, Kelvin. I already know. Bayo looked confused. You know what? Sonia smiled. That Kelvin is acting rich. Bayo blinked. Ah. Then he started laughing loudly. Finally someone discovered him. Kelvin covered his face. My reputation is finished. Near the swimming pool, several influencers were competing for the best pictures. One lady stood on a chair posing beside the pool. Another one was directing her friend. No, take the picture again. Make it look like I'm laughing naturally. Her friend sighed. You have taken 30 pictures already. I need the perfect one. Meanwhile, a young man was pretending to talk on the phone. Yes, send the $200,000 now. Unfortunately, the phone screen was clearly showing no service. Kelvin pointed at the scene and whispered to Sonia. This place is a movie. Sonia nodded. Welcome to Lekki. Then something unexpected happened. Suddenly the music stopped. Everyone looked toward the front of the mansion. A tall man had walked into the compound. He looked serious. He was holding a microphone. People started whispering. Who is that? I think he organized the party. The man spoke loudly. Good evening, everyone. The crowd became quiet. My name is David. Tonight's party was organized for a special reason. People started looking confused. Kelvin whispered to Sonia. This sounds suspicious. David continued speaking. Tonight we are filming a social experiment. The crowd murmured. What experiment? David smiled slightly. A documentary about fake luxury lifestyles in Lekki. The entire party became silent. Then David pointed at several cameras around the compound. Everything happening tonight is being recorded. Kelvin's heart skipped a beat. Sonia looked shocked. Tunda nearly dropped his drink. Some people immediately started panicking. Wait. Recorded. David continued calmly. We invited influencers, businessmen, and socialites to this party. Tonight we want to show the world something. He paused. The difference between real wealth and fake wealth. The crowd suddenly became very uncomfortable. Several people quickly started leaving. One man whispered nervously, delete my pictures. Another woman shouted, turn off that camera. Kelvin looked at Sonia. Did you know about this? Sonia shook her head slowly. No. Tunda whispered to Lola. We should run. Lola nodded quickly. Yes. But just as many people started heading toward the gate, David said something that froze everyone. Before anyone leaves, he smiled. We already invited some special guests tonight. Kelvin felt a strange fear in his stomach. Special guests. David pointed toward the entrance. People who know the real lives of some of you here. Kelvin whispered nervously. Oh no. And then the gate opened. Several people began walking inside the compound. Landlords, employers, friends, even car rental agents. Kelvin saw one familiar face among them. His heart nearly stopped. It was Mr. Adime, the landlord. Kelvin turned slowly to Sonia. "Sonia, we are finished." Across the party, Tunda also spotted someone walking toward him. His office supervisor. The man who knew he worked night shifts. Tunda whispered in panic, "My life is over." Around the compound people were starting to shout. Some were arguing. Some were running. Because the cameras were still recording everything. For a few seconds after the man with the microphone finished speaking, the entire party in Lekki became quiet. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. Everyone was looking around nervously at the cameras. Kelvin whispered to Sonia, "This is bad." Across the pool, Tunda was already sweating. Lola stood beside him pretending to smile, but inside she was panicking. The organizer, David, watched the crowd carefully. He could see the fear on many faces. Some people were quietly trying to hide their faces. Others were pretending nothing was wrong. Then suddenly, David started laughing. At first, the crowd didn't understand. Then he raised the microphone again. "Relax everyone." People looked confused. David continued laughing. "There is no documentary. There is no social experiment." The crowd stared at him. It was just a prank. For a moment nobody spoke. Then someone shouted, "What?" David shook his head, still smiling. "I only wanted to see how people would react." Slowly, the tension began to disappear. Some people laughed nervously. Others shook their heads in annoyance. One man near the bar shouted, "You almost gave me heart attack." Music slowly started playing again. The party returned to normal. But something had changed. For a few seconds, everyone had been afraid that their secrets might be exposed. And that fear said a lot. Kelvin looked at Sonia and sighed deeply. "That prank almost finished my life." Sonia laughed. "You and your fake billionaire lifestyle." Kelvin shrugged. "At least I'm trying." Across the party, Tunda and Lola were also talking. Tunda shook his head. "I thought my boss was about to expose me." Lola smiled. "I thought someone from my office would show up." They laughed about it. But deep down, none of them planned to change. Life continues in Lekki. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And life continued in Lekki exactly the same way. Kelvin kept chasing the appearance of success. He borrowed cars for pictures. He posted motivational quotes online. His followers continued to grow. But his bank account remained almost empty. Most of the money he earned went into maintaining the lifestyle he wanted people to believe. Sonia also continued building her influencer life. Luxury pictures, beautiful outfits, hotel photos, soft life captions. Thousands of people admired her life. But behind the perfect pictures, she was constantly struggling to keep up. Sometimes she spent money she didn't have just to maintain the image. Tunda and Lola were no different. Tunda still introduced himself as a tech entrepreneur. Meanwhile he continued working night shifts to survive. Lola still presented herself online as a powerful corporate woman. But in reality she was still trying to find stability in her career. They all had something in common. They were working harder to look successful than to actually become successful. And because of that, they remained broke. Meanwhile, while many people in Lekki were busy chasing appearances, two people were quietly living a different life. Ada and Emeka. Ada continued working at the hospital as a nurse. She focused on her work and lived simply. Emeka returned from London and settled back into his apartment. Unlike many others around him, Emeka never cared about impressing people. One afternoon he visited the hospital to see a friend. That was where he met Ada again. Their conversations were simple, honest. No exaggerations. No fake lifestyles. No need to impress each other. Just two people talking about real life. Over time their friendship became stronger. They supported each other. They respected each other. And slowly, without drama or noise, they fell in love. Their relationship didn't need luxury pictures or social media approval. It was built on something stronger. Truth. Years later, Kelvin was still chasing followers. Sonia was still chasing perfect pictures. Tunda was still chasing the image of success. Lola was still chasing a title she had not yet earned. They were always busy trying to look successful. But they never truly moved forward. Meanwhile, Ada and Emeka continued building a simple, stable, and honest life together. They were not the loudest people in Lekki. But they were among the happiest. What's the lesson here? Pretending to be successful may attract attention for a moment, but it cannot build lasting happiness. Real success grows slowly. It comes from honesty, hard work, patience, and living within your reality. Because at the end of the day, one simple truth remains. A fake life may impress people for a moment, but only a real life can bring true peace and lasting happiness. The end. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Your time means the world to me, and I don't take it for granted. Every view, every like, every comment, they encourage me more than you can imagine. I pray that as you support me, God will support you too. May favor find you, may joy never depart from your life, and may all your dreams come true. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Stay safe, stay blessed, see you next time. Bye bye.